Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I'm super thrilled to be here with Alexandra Vasti. Am I saying that right?
So my family pronounces it Vasti, like
Yes.
rhymes with nasty, which regrettably, alas, is the only word in English that rhymes with Vasti. Yeah, so that's how my family.
No. Okay. In my head, I hear it as Vasti, and I knew I was going to say it wrong. So Alexandra Vasti. Remember that. It'll be easy to remember. And we're going to be talking about her historical novels, near Duke Well and upcoming Earl Crush and any other books that she's written because I'm just fascinated by her whole story. But before we get to Alexander, I'm going to just say a couple of things. One is I'd like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. We couldn't do this fun stuff without them. And I'd also like to thank Alexander for letting us share this program with other local libraries because, when libraries work together, we make magic. So, you can buy signed books from Alexander from Blue Cypress Books. And I will send information about that to everybody because you can get 10% off of your books if you give them a code at checkout. And, signed books are gold, and signed books for 10% off are, I don't know, platinum? Better than gold, I don't know. Anyways, so we're just going to have this rapid fire Q&A. And so if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Sometimes the chat goes by too fast for me to catch questions, so make sure you do that. But use the chat to chatter with each other and like say funny things. I'll pay attention to it, but I won't always get the questions there. Okay, so Alexandra, I'm not gonna say too much about her because I'm gonna ask her about her, but she's like this really interesting person who lives in Louisiana, teaches literature, and then writes historical romances by night. She is powered by guacamole and oat milk lattes, which I just think might make me sick. So,
At the same time.
oh, okay. All right. So,
Morning, PM.
I was so happy when you said yes, you would do this because I just think your books are wonderful. So let's get into it. First of all, tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where'd you come from?
Okay, all right. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I was just beyond like thrilled when you reached out to me because I have been familiar with your library and your wonderful romance supportive programming for so long. So, yeah, so thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for coming. I'm excited to chat with all of you, and for the other libraries as well who helped support this and promoted it and everything. So, all right. So, yeah, I mean, I think you hit the high point. So, I'm a professor in my day job. I actually just got tenure this week, so that was pretty exciting. Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank
I mean, you
you.
look like you're 15, so I mean,
What?
what?
I think that's the filter. That's not a
Oh,
an accurate representation.
gotcha.
Yeah, I have been writing for a really long time. I wrote my first romance novella when I was 14. It was like a PI investigating a murder and falling in love as you do, as you do as a female PI. And let's see. Yeah, so I've been writing for a really long time, but Narrative Well was the first book that I actually tried to publish. It was the first, I've been writing novels for so long, and like saying that I wanted to do it and I wanted to try to get an agent and just not doing it. And finally, for my birthday in 2021, my husband made me a list of agents who were accepting romance novels. And he was like, "You've been talking
Oh,
about this for for as long as I've known you, like here, this is, you should do this for yourself this year." It still took me like 6 months to get up the nerve, but I finally queried Ne'er Do Well, queried agents, and then sold it. And yeah, Ne'er Do Well was my first novel, and it came out in July.
amazing. I mean, that's a key. He's a keeper, by the way. Okay, so let's go back again a little bit because I just don't know how you go from being like this, whatever, cool, nerdy, whatever child to reading romance, but then becoming a literature professor. Like, what was going on for you? Like, were you reading romance as a kid? Were you just reading as a kid? What was
No, my first romance was Whitney My Love, which
happening?
my mother gave to me when I was 11. And she's horrified when I tell the story. She's not in the audience. I can guarantee she's
I
not in
was
the
going
audience.
to say 11. Hmm.
Hear me telling this story. Yes. No, she gave me Whitney My Love when I was 11, and which is was I mean, a choice. A real choice. But okay, so I read Whitney My Love and I closed it, and I was like, at the same time I was like, what did I just read? But also, is there more? Are there more? Can I have them all? Can I devour them? So yeah, so I've been reading historical romance ever since. And I've always loved historicals. I love history, and I mean, obviously that's a big part of my job, researching history and the literary history of the period that I work on. And I never like I always wanted to write romance. But I never, even though historical was like my first love, I never felt like I really knew how to do research until after I got my PhD. Like I just didn't even know where you would start. You know what I mean? Like how would you even begin to find out like what is the button on their coat made of? You know, like what would they have for dinner? So it really wasn't until after I got my PhD that I felt like I kind of understood how that research would work and kind of had the tools in my toolbox to do that. So that was after I finished my PhD, which was in 2019. That was when I started writing historicals.
That's really interesting because you live in Louisiana and and there's so much historical stuff there. Like you could go to a plantation and you can go to like, like we go to Colonial Williamsburg or I've spoken to Loretta Chase and Susan Scott Holloway Scott about this, is that they go to Colonial Williamsburg to see what's, feel things and see things and talk to the people that are making things. So did you have that opportunity where you are as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I have done that. I've also done, traveling in the UK. So I'm a British literature professor, so a lot of my research is in the UK. So for a while I was going to the UK like every year doing it's actually been kind of a while. We're actually going this summer though, so I'm excited to get back. But yeah, so that definitely is part of my research, but a lot too. I think fortunately, I mean, I do love to see things and smell things and touch them and take photos and even just, go into a house or go into a museum and look at the furniture and things like that. But also luckily, working in the 19th century, a lot of stuff is digitized and it's in the public domain and it's freely available online. So I use a lot of primary sources from different libraries or from, Trust or things like that, because these 19th century texts are there. So like one of the things that I love are like cookbooks and menu planning from the 19th century. I love food. I'm a huge foodie and I love to write food. So I'm like, all right, like the scene is set in November. Like what would have been on a menu in November? What foods would have been fresh? There are obviously things that we don't have the same kind of importing foods or refrigeration. So like I can pull up 9 different menu planning books and figure out like what people would have really been eating at that time when the right year, the right part of the season, etc. So that's really, I mean, I think that's really great. And it's something that I think is really kind of just empowering to anyone who wants to write historical. You don't have to be in a certain place or travel because so much has been digitized. I think that's really cool.
Well, that brings up a question from Sam, who is also in my romance book club. And she says, as a fellow history nerd, do you have a niche area of history or person, or one area that you would love to see historical romance sink their teeth into?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Okay, so my like niche, I feel like kind of changes with every book. Like so with Ne'er-do-Well, when I was writing Ne'er-do-Well, it was all about historical erotica. Like that, I mean, because that was, that I came up with this idea that she was gonna have this library and have this special Venus catalog. And I wanted to have all the books in the Venus catalog be real. I didn't want to be like making stuff up. I wanted it to be grounded in what kinds of texts would have existed, could people have had access to, could have been, maybe not on the shelf, but kind of sneakily distributed around. So for like a year, I just researched so much historical erotica and I learned so much. I mean, I think often we think of the past as very like prim and proper, and that is just not backed up by the historical record. So most recently I have recently finished the third book in the series, which is about rival Gothic novelists. It's a sapphic romance about rival Gothic novelists. So I did a ton of research into like queer Regency and queer people in the Regency. But also I got really obsessed with this one particular house, this like kind of Gothic-y house that was owned by this queer man in the Regency who was like a collector, and he was like a really, really, really rich for bad reasons that are unfortunately historically accurate. And so I like really dove deep into this one Gothic house. So that's my most recent kind of research niche.
So funny. Okay, so let's actually go back to the books then, because I just jumped right into to the questions. Tell us about Near Duke Well. What is it about? And then we'll talk about the series and more questions.
Okay, yes. Okay, so Ne'er-do-Well is the first book in the series. And it is about a man from New Orleans, Peter, who unexpectedly becomes a duke. He's like the third, he's like the son of the third son. No one expected him to inherit, but unexpectedly he becomes a duke. So he's brought over from New Orleans to England to inherit this dukedom. And he finds out while he's there that he has an illegitimate half brother and sister, and he wants to become their guardian. And unfortunately, he's not in a good position to become their guardian because he's from New Orleans, his mom was French, he's kind of very suspicious, and also he's a mess. He just causes chaos wherever he goes. He's an abolitionist, so he's made all these kind of radical speeches that have made people angry, which are all taken from real actual speeches. That's not anachronistic. Like these are actual historical speeches in the House of Commons. Anyway, so he wants to get guardianship of his brother and sister, so he turns to his friend, who is this very kind of capable managing woman, and her name is Selina, and he asks for her help. And she comes up with the idea that to make himself more respectable, he should get married. Because it's a romance novel, obviously that's the solution to this problem. So she comes up with that idea and she matchmakes for him. And unfortunately, in the process of matchmaking, they fall in love, which is a problem because secretly she runs an erotic circulating library for women. And if that were to get out, obviously it would destroy her reputation. And the whole point is for him to make himself more respectable. So, they can't fall in love, but as I'm sure I'm shocking everyone, they do. That is so the library is kind of all the books in the series are centered around this library that she runs. So the second book is about a friend who writes anonymous radical political pamphlets that are distributed through the library. And then the third book is about the two Gothic novelists, both of whom have their books published in the library.
Well, as I'm going to say, as a librarian, I just love all of this. Like, it's just, like having anything about the written word, especially women back in the day, having some sort of agency around the written word and their sexuality, I think is just fascinating and fabulous. So Sam asks another question. As a researcher and historian, while also being a romance writer, what do you think of incorporating real historical individuals and adding to their stories? As you just said, that you really do use, the speeches and the things like that. So obviously, you're quite capable of pulling real people and real situations into your books.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I've not done this really. Well, that's not really true. So in Ne'er-do-Well, the kind of the judge who is has to decide the case. His name is John Lord Eldon, and he's a real person. And I just co-opted this poor man and made him a character in my tried to make him like fairly sympathetic so that his descendants wouldn't like sue me. They're like actual peers living out there right now that I've written about their like great great granddad. Anyway, so I personally have not done it with any like big historical figures, but I love when that I mean I love when like Byron strolls onto the page or like an Evie Dunmore, like Oscar Wilde turns up. I love when that happens. I've only done it with minor people so far, but who knows?
I love
I also
that.
do a lot of like I'll take a name of a real historical figure and kind of like sneak it in as someone's like first name or something like that. So that's kind of like my private thing that I like to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's funny because I think for me, like reading historical romance since I was a kid, not quite as young as you, but reading historical romance, was that I felt like I understood history, and I would go places I'd be like, "Ooh, that was in this book I read," and I could speak to it. So I think it's for me, it's been important that the history is actually pretty accurate, and then that there's stuff added onto it. So I don't know if that's something that influences you in terms of like how much of reality you put into your books.
Right. Right. I mean, it's hard, especially because I think all romance is going to be a fantasy. So, like these really, like I write a lot of really lovely men who are like really supportive. And of course, there were lovely men in the historical past, but like the preponderance of them in my eyes is probably not super, super historically accurate. But I do think that that's really important. And I try to put notes in the author's notes. This was really important to me, especially like with book 3, which is a sapphic romance. like I have encountered so many people who think that a sapphic romance is unrealistic, or like, oh, well, they couldn't actually have been happy. So it was so important to me to write this author's note and be like, look at these examples of real people that I'm drawing from, like this happily ever after where they live in, in their Gothic house or whatever. Like, look at these real women actually living that way, right? And we have so much historical evidence for that happening. So I think that is really, I mean, it's very, very important to me to show that.
Well, we were talking about this a little bit before we started, is that one of the things I love about historical romance right now is the diversity of stories that is being told, things that weren't being told before for whatever reasons. And what you just said is really, really hits me, because I'm like, yes, there was all of that back then. And it's taking a new generation of writers to really bring that to the fore. And how is that for you? Like, do you feel like pressure to like tell diverse stories, or is that something you were always going to do?
I think that that's a good question. I mean, no, I don't feel pressured to do that at all. I do think it's important to me to try to reflect some of the realities of the historical period. So like in Ne'er Do Well, Peter's barrister, his name is Mohan Tagore, and he is based on his name. I borrowed his name from the first Indian, like Anglo-Indian person called to the bar.
Mhm.
Right. So like I am trying to show that these are real people who really existed. We see people of color, where there are more people of color in Jane Austen than there are dukes, Like this idea, this like the whitewashing of history is just not accurate. So yeah, so it's definitely, I think, really important to me to show those kind of historical realities.
Mhm. And what I guess, I mean, this is what is the purpose, like from your perspective, what is the purpose of bringing those stories forth? Whether you're in that community or not, whether you're a person, an author of color, or an author, an LGBTQ author, what is what purpose does that serve to the reading community, do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, I don't know, like I don't want to try to say that I have some grandiose purpose. I'm a white woman, and it's important to me not to be taking up space from authors of color who are centering people of color in their stories to take space in the publishing industry. But I am also a professor, and I spend a lot of time, showing students and people what the realities of the historical past look like. And I think expanding our understanding of who lived in the historical past and what their lives were like is really critical. So like one of the things so in Ne'er Do Well, like I mentioned, Peter is an abolitionist, and I'm taking his speeches from real speeches in the House of Commons. And I think sometimes people look back in the historical past and are like, well, everyone, thought slavery was fine. And that's just not true, right? It is absolutely clear that abolitionists in the Regency had a strong voice in government and were actively making strides. And many people looked at enslavement and knew that it was wrong. And
Mhm.
so I think for me, it is very, very important to show that range of what was happening in history.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think this is my opinion, is that now that there's more authors of color and on that LGBTQ spectrum that are writing and having their voices heard, that allows everybody to write a more full picture of what, like in their stories. So, yeah, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, guys. If you want to ask something funny, please do. Like this question, did you purposely name it Belvoir, like Beaver Castle in Leicester? Because, erotic
Okay,
novel.
the Beaver Castle story. All right, so here's the story. No, no. All right. So when I was coming up with the name of her library, I was just looking at things, and I somehow came upon Belvoir, and it means beautiful view. But I also thought there was something about it that this idea of seeing, right? Voir is to see. And I thought that's what she wants, like in her library. She wants people to see, to have access. And I thought that was really lovely. So I named it Belvoir's, and which I Googled, and it's a real castle. And I was like, perfect. It's historically accurate. It has this nice meaning. It's great. And then, like a month before publication, I saw this TikTok video of this British man being like, welcome to Beaver Castle. And I learned that this word that in my mind was pronounced Belvoir's that they pronounce it beaver. And I was like, oh my God. And I created an erotic library for women and named it Beaver's Library. I was like, this is a, so anyway, I was very worried about the audiobook because it had already been recorded and I hadn't heard it. And I was like, and you know, she's British. I was like, what? She's Scottish. I was like, what if she says it beavers? I'm just gonna like I don't know if you can see, but I can feel my face getting hot right now. Anyway, she pronounced it Belvoir. I was very relieved. But the real castle in England, they do say a beaver. Beaver Castle, yeah.
I think it's perfect. This means like it's meant to be.
It's a little bit meant to be. A little bit, yeah.
Okay. So Deborah asked, how do you balance the romance with other aspects of the story, like character development and plot? Because one of my favorite things about Ne'er-do-well was how both characters had personal growth arcs that extended beyond their romance.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. And as I'm conceptualizing the books, I am very much a character-driven writer. So like, even though the hook of Ne'er-do-well, I think is like this, oh, the secret erotic library for ladies. That was like the last thing I came up with in creating the book. I always start with the characters and developing them and fleshing them out and making them round. So for Ne'er-do-well, like I came up with Selina first. And I had this idea, like where Selina came from was kind of like the character, I feel like it's sort of a classic historical romance character of like the dragon aunt. Like who, you know, kind of like I like Lady Danbury in Bridgerton, or like Lady de Marley in my favorite book, which is Flowers from the Storm by Laura Caldale. Yeah, that's my favorite book. So there's so often in historical romance, there's this aunt who is like comes in and is like, I know everything and I'm gonna fix everything. And I was like, why does she never get a book? Like what's her story? How did she, you know? So that's where Selina came from. I wanted this person who thinks they know best, they know what's what, and they know how to fix everything. I wanted her to be my heroine. So I had to pair her with someone who was going to mess that up, right? Who was going to come in and challenge her and unsettle her and throw her off a little bit. So that's where Peter came from, this very chaotic person. And so the idea of Belvoir is, I was really thinking about, well, what's going to keep them apart? Why can't they just get married on page 20, quite a short book. So I was thinking about Selina, this kind of fixer, and I thought, what you know, in looking around, the people that she encounters, the people that she interacts with, her friends, what is she going to want to fix? What problem is she going to see in her society that she's going to want to change? So anyway, all that to say, thinking about their flaws, it is really important to me, and thinking about how they can come to grips with that. And for Peter and Selina, the story that I really wanted to tell was kind of coming to recognize their own strengths and what they have to offer the other. So there's a scene in it where it's kind of the scene where they're at Freddie's bedside, Peter's brother, as he's sick, and Selina is saying like she feels bad, she feels like she's not doing anything, and Peter's like, you have done so much, you know, you brought in the furniture and you brought in all these things, and she's like, well, that's easy for me, right? Like that stuff seems easy, and I feel like that's really true for us. We just as humans, we undervalue our own strengths because the things that do come easily. And so that was, I kind of wanted both of them to come to see their own strengths, that they do have something to offer the other person, even if they've not necessarily seen that in themselves.
Well, it's nice that they see it in each other. You know, sometimes even, you know, people don't pay attention. And I think your characters did a great job of that. Can you talk about the process for the Halifax Hellions? That's how I first found you, says one of our attendees.
Yes. Okay. I love to tell the story of the Halifax Hellions. So the Halifax Hellions, I were originally self-published, and then my publisher bought them. So the first Halifax novella, Margot, came out in September 2021, and then they came out traditionally published in this February, so February 2024. No, 2022, I guess. I don't know, some year. Yeah, September 2022 it came out, and then it came out traditionally published in this February. So obviously those novellas came out way before Ne'er-do-well, but weirdly, I actually wrote Ne'er-do-well first. Publishing timelines are just very odd. So as I mentioned, Ne'er-do-well is a matchmaking book, and I knew I wanted to have that classic matchmaking scene where they're suggesting all the possible people, and the matchmaker is like, no, 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 because of course they want the person for themselves. So I had to come up with all of these women for Selina to reject, like not her. So one of the lines is like these wild twins, these like Margot and Matilda, these like wild redheaded Halifax twins, and they do all this scandalous stuff. And Selena's like, okay, I love them, but no, because he needs like a proper wife. Like they're not a good candidate. And so I wrote that just like one-off sentence, and I fell in love with them. I was like, what is their story? Like, who are these twins? Why are they like this? What's driving them, to flout convention at every turn? So I'd written that. I got my agent for Ne'er-do-Well. It's called going out on submission. So like she emails it to editors like at different publishing houses. And the advice that they give while you're waiting to hear back, because it can be quite, long and draining, is to write another book. So I had this other novel that I was gonna write. I had cleared it with my agent, and I just couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about these Halifax twins. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna not tell my agent that I'm writing these novellas. And so I decided I was gonna write two novellas, one for Margot, the first twin, and then a simultaneous novella where you kind of find out the other side of the story with Matilda, the other twin.
I have to say, I love simultaneous books. I love
me too. It did end up being three that were all simultaneous, and that was a challenge, but I had fun with it. So anyway, so I put the first one out on my newsletter, which my agent was fine with, and we went out on submission. I was writing the second one, and then Ne'er-do-Well sold really fast, like in 3 weeks, which I did not see coming. And I had planned I was going to put the first one on my newsletter and the second novella like on Kindle Unlimited. And I was like, maybe they'll cross promote. I don't know what I was doing. I had like 20 followers on social media. I was not really a person in the world at the time. So Ne'er-do-Well sold really fast. And then I had a non-compete in my contract. And they were like, sorry, you can't publish this other one. And I was like, I have to. Like, they're simultaneous. Like, you need both sides of the story. So I actually had them write it into my contract that I could publish the second one as long as I kept it on my newsletter. Like, it had to stay off of retailer sites. So that's what happened. So I ended up putting them both out on my newsletter. And I was just really lucky in that they had a really great reception. And I was just astonished by how many people, I mean, I think by the time they sold and I had to take them off, they had like 20,000 downloads. I mean, it was just this, I was completely blown away by that. And all because I wrote one-off sentence and I fell in love with them and I had to know what their story was.
That to me is a sign of a true writer where, you can take any little tidbit and make it into a book.
Well, it's all about those characters for me. Like I said, like I always start with the characters and I want to know what their story is. And then I build the plot, kind of around them.
Mm-hmm. So, would you say you're a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, I'm definitely a plotter. Yeah, very much. I have to write an outline and I have to write in chronological order. Like I just need to start at the beginning of the book and write through to the end. And then I can go back and fix it later. But like I am just astonished by authors who just write the scenes they want to write in whatever order. Because if I did that, I would never finish the book. Like I have to have that like dangling carrot of like eventually you're gonna get to this really fun scene. So you have to get through the scene like that. I hate to write fighting. Like if I get really sad. So I'm like, or you have to get through this fight so that you can get to the love declaration at the end. You can do it.
That's great. So I've heard from other authors that they consider fight scenes to be like sex scenes because you have to block them all out just the same, pretty much the same, except with different instruments, I would say.
Maybe different emotions. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
No, I don't like to write fight scenes. I don't like for my characters to like to be sad or to hurt each other's feelings. I mean, obviously, like you have to do it. Like that's part of writing the book, but like I get really sad. I don't know. I didn't really cry that much when writing Ne'er-do-Well. But in the third book, I cried so much. And I write in coffee shops a lot. And I was like, I don't think I can come back to this coffee shop. I've been like sobbing for 2 hours. So there's one coffee shop in New Orleans that I don't think I've gone back to since I cried for 2 hours in there while typing.
Oh no. Now we definitely have to read it. And we talked about this earlier too, though, is that although you write books that initially might come across as sort of lighter and fluffier, that you actually really like the angst in the deeper books.
I do. I mean, I also love like lighter comedic books. Like I was saying, like Loretta Chase is a huge, huge influence for me, or Tessa Dare. I mean, I love them so much. And I would consider those more like lighter, comedic, more joyful books. But yeah, my secret is that I love angsty, sad, like sob. Like I mentioned Laura Kinsale. Like Laura Kinsale will make me sob forever. And she's my number one favorite writer. Actually, if anyone follows me on social media, you'll know my obsession with Laura Kinsale. I'm actually starting a Laura Kinsale podcast with my friend Meg from Plottress. We're going to do a podcast. We have so many great guests lined up to be on our podcast with us. Eloisa James, we're talking with Eloisa, and a bunch of really amazing guests. Tasha Suri, Alex Harrow, Olivia Waite, a lot of great people. So it's going to be amazing. And that's going to start next year. We're actually starting recording Sunday.
Oh
So
my gosh.
Laura Kinsale, stay tuned for our Kinsale
Send me the
podcast.
link for it. I will
I
definitely
will.
be paying attention. I mean, that's how we talked about Cresley Cole earlier in Immortals After Dark. I mean, that's how Sarah McLean and Jen Folks, started that podcast, and now they talk about everything.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
love that. So we have a question of how do you develop the chemistry between your main characters, like certain elements or traits that you think are key? And I want to add to that and ask about tropes, because I noticed your forced proximity seems to be one that you seem to like.
Yeah, well, I went to a workshop with Sherry Thomas, that was incredible.
Mhm.
She's another one of my all-time favorites, and it was an incredibly good writing workshop. And she was like, all romance novels are forced proximity. Like they have to have something keeping them together. And I've really been like thinking about that for like a year or two now. Like, are all romance novels forced proximity? And to some extent, I do think that that is the case. I mean, sometimes I've got them like literally trapped, which is literal forced proximity. But ultimately, there has to be something between the characters that would drive them apart, right? They can't just there has to be some kind of a problem that's gonna inherently keep them apart, because otherwise the book's over. It's 20 pages long. They meet, they fall, they go on some dates, they fall in love. That doesn't make a good romance novel. So there has to be something driving them apart, but there also has to be something holding them together, or else they split off and go their separate ways. And that also doesn't make a great romance novel. So yeah, so I actually think that fourth proximity is really central to just how I conceptualize conflict, and characterization and the romance.
Mhm.
And
And
the
the
question,
question
yeah,
from that person, because I took over, was about the chemistry. How do you create chemistry between your characters?
that's an interesting question. I guess it's not something that I would say that I necessarily do, like that I have a trick to, but one thing I will say is that I really like for my characters to like each other. And sometimes in romance, I love romance. I love enemies to lovers, right? But sometimes in romance, I'm like, do you like each other? Like they're fighting so much. I'm like, do you actually want to hang out?
Every
So
every Harlequin in the 80s.
yeah, right. Maybe just because I grew up on that. Or like, Whitney, my love. I'm like, do you like each other? Well, actually, Whitney, my love is not a good example because I just recently reread it. And there are some like great scenes of Whitney and Clayton like really enjoying each other's company. And those are the ones that really stuck with me. So yeah, so it's really important to me in all of my romances to see that these characters really enjoy spending time with her or with each other. And I was thinking about Margot, which is like the first of my Halifax novellas. And so the premise of this one is that Henry, the hero, has been in love with Margot for 7 years. Since he met her, he fell in love on the spot, insta love, and has been pining for her for 7 years. And he's very shy. And she's the sort of wild, chaotic hurricane of a hellion, and he doesn't know how to tell her. And she asks him for help to go chase after her sister, who she thinks has eloped. And he's like horrified by he's like, oh no, I can't do it. Like all my feelings are gonna come out of my mouth. It's gonna be a disaster. But he doesn't want her to go by herself, so he goes with her. And so I was writing this novella, and I can remember this moment so vividly. I'm in Henry's head, and he's talking about, he's in the carriage with her, and I'm like, oh, he's tormented by lust, and just kind of being silly. And then I started writing, and I'm like, and spending every minute of every day with Margot was and in my head, I just heard Henry's voice saying, wonderful. And I was like, yes, like that is how he would feel. He's not tormented. He thinks it's wonderful. It's the best thing that ever has happened to him that he gets to spend every minute of every day with this woman that he loves.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, I really understand his character now, and I really, can hear his voice so clearly in my head. And I want to say that the audiobook narrator, Mari Morrison, that line, she nails it so hard because she kind of like sighs and she's like, was wonderful. And it's so cute. So yeah, just got to shout out Mari because she's incredible.
that is amazing because, that makes what can be a happily ever after is if they like each other. If you believe that with all of your heart when you finish a book, is that they like each other, they love each other, and they're going to stay together forever, right? Um,
Right.
I wanted to mention one thing about forced proximity though, because I think that for me, like the couple doesn't have to be together in terms of like physically to have forced proximity. I think emotionally there's that aspect as well where they just can't stop thinking of each other, even if they're miles and miles apart, which means that they have to get together, right? So
Yeah.
I love I love seeing that in books because it's just that they can't be separate. They can't, physically or emotionally. And
Right. Yeah.
another
Sherry
thing.
Thomas writes some really good ones like that, where they're like separated by years and distances, and yet, you still feel that. She's so good
I
at that.
love Sherry Thomas. And we were talking about Nalini Singh earlier. One of the things I love about her books is that her characters are almost immediately loyal to each other. So it's not
Mm,
necessarily the like thing, but they have each other's backs from the very beginning. And
yeah.
that's something that I really like too. And I think that that happens in your books too, where they kind of like really like, support each other throughout, whether they're in love yet or not. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that too.
Okay, so I talked a lot. I talked too much, but that is if people want to hear from you. So, in your research for any of your books, what's a piece of information or event that surprised you or that you would like to whip out? I don't know, does that
Okay.
mean like cut it out or whip it out?
No, whip it out. Yeah, okay. So one thing that really surprised me. So as I mentioned with Nerdy, I was doing a lot of research into historical erotica, because I wanted to fill her library with real books. And I was really astonished how much of the erotica from the period, especially the late 18th century, was featured lesbian scenes or was primarily two women. I mean, I would venture to say the majority that I read. I was shocked by that. And I mean, I didn't expect that it would be unheard of, right? Because, it's the historical past. Of course, there were queer people then as now, but I was shocked by how common it was. I mean, some of it is like a little fetishy, of course, but like so one of the books I talk a lot about in Ne'er Do Well is Fanny Hill.
Mhm.
Because it was so popular. Like it was just, everyone read it and talked about. I mean, everyone knew Fanny Hill.
I've read it.
Right out. It's actually like a pretty good read and surprisingly very sexy in parts,
Mhm.
like even though it's 300 years old. Anyway, the first like three or four sex scenes in Fanny Hill are all between two women, between Fanny and Phoebe. And Phoebe is like, we're very clearly told that Phoebe is like what we would call today pansexual. And that's completely normalized. It is not shocking. It's not surprising. And I was like, I was surprised to see how just widely accepted that was. And again, some of it is fetishy. It's not all just like this great representation of queerness by any stretch of the imagination. But I was just surprised how common and frequent that was. So that's something that really surprised me and that I do mention frequently, especially when people want to challenge the historical realities, of lesbian women or things like that in the period.
Mhm.
One
Um,
thing also that people may not know is that sex between women was never criminalized. So in England, so sex between men was criminalized, right? And we see even up to and including the death penalty in the 19th century. But sex between women was never criminalized. So there's actually like a very kind of famous political or like cartoon, like social cartoon of like these two women kind of canoodling in the park, and their husbands are like glaring at them from a bush, and they're like, "What do we do?" Because it wasn't illegal. There was nothing they could do. There's actually court cases where men are trying to sort of like accuse their wives of adultery by like because they have lady friends, intimate lady friends, and the judges are like, "Sorry, it's not adultery. It doesn't count." There's actually one that I read the transcript of, and the judge was like, "I don't get it." He was like, "But what do they do, the ladies?" So anyway, so that's the thing that sometimes surprises people is that yeah, that sex between women was not criminalized.
yeah, well, they weren't allowed to divorce, so they had to do something, right?
It it was very difficult to access divorce. Yes, that's something that I talk a little bit about in Earl Crush, actually. Yeah.
We will talk about Earl Crush in a second. Um, do you have a favorite romance trope other than forced proximity that you personally like to read about? And are there ones you have in mind for future books? And
Um,
add on, are there any that you absolutely will never ever read or write about?
I don't think there's anything I would never read. I can't even imagine what I would feel that strongly about. My favorite trope is second chance. And again, this is my angsty love, because nothing is angstier than second chance, especially like a Sherry Thomas style, like dual timeline. Like you see them falling in love in the past, but you know it's going to go wrong and it's going to be that. Oh, I love it. I just eat it all up, all that delicious angst. I have not tried to write second chance yet. So we'll see, maybe someday. I don't know how I would get through that angst. I'd just be crying. I'd have to knock off like 10 coffee shops in New Orleans. But I
And you could never go back to them.
no, this is gonna be a problem. I have to write in my backyard more. Um, yeah, so ideas I have in mind for future books. Well, let's see. I can tell you that I guess maybe my book three is a little bit, it's not really second chance, but basically the premise of book three is that so we have Georgiana, who is one of the characters from Ne'er Do Well. It's her story, and she is a Gothic novelist. So at this point, it's been a number of years. She's sort of publicly known as a Gothic novelist, and she's publishing quite a bit. And there is this competing Gothic novelist who she is becomes convinced is stealing her ideas. She's like, I don't know how, somehow she's reading my manuscript, she's stealing my ideas, and she's trying to ruin my career. So she decides that she's going to track down this other novelist and and unmask her and whatever. This is the very beginning. This is like the first chapter of the book. So she does. She tracks her down. The other novelist sort of puts back her hood, and Georgiana realizes that it is this woman that she has known and that she had like a huge crush on when she was a teenager. And she's like, never mind. Like I don't have a problem. Actually, I'm gonna go by. And so that's how the book starts. So I guess it's like a little tiny, like a little soupçon of second chance. It's because she did have this massive crush on her when they were teenagers.
Sweet. I can't wait for it. I don't like reading secret baby books. That's why I asked about that.
Hmm. No, I like the Secret Baby. I feel like some of those like 90s Secret Babies really like got in my brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't, and we've talked about this in my romance book club, is I can't think of any good reason why somebody would keep that a secret from the father. Like unless they thought the father was dead or something, to me,
Right. Did. I mean, I think there has to be like some kind of power differential going on there, right? That is like the only way that you can kind of like keep some of your power. So I could see that really working in a historical.
like,
It's sort of Secret Baby-ish. Nobody's Baby But Mine by Susan Elizabeth Phillips. Did you ever read that? Oh man, that
the
book
serial
like
killer.
a serial killer. There's a serial killer in that, is there?
Oh, there's totally a serial killer. For everybody who's here and read it.
How have I blocked out the serial killer?
Oh, you're gonna have to go back and read
I am
it.
gonna have to go back. No, all I remember is her thinking that he's dumb, and that's why she picks him out. And then it turns out he's smart, and she's so upset and wrecked. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That was it. But they did get together quickly, I would
They did.
say.
It
Yeah.
wasn't like she kept it a secret for years, or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm just saying that that's one of my um somebody says, yes, please write second chance. I need the regret, then the yearning, and the missing each other.
Love it.
Um, so Alex, tell us about Earl Crush. We've talked about Near Duke Well, we've talked about the third book. Let's talk about Earl Crush. It's just coming out in January.
Yes, January 21st. Okay, so this is Lydia's book. So if you read Ne'er Do Well, Lydia is Selena's best friend. And so I sort of, in the epilogue to Ne'er Do Well, I kind of tease that Lydia has started. So she's very shy. She has severe social anxiety. She does not like to be in public and interact with people that she doesn't know well. And so I sort of tease in the epilogue that she has started writing these anonymous political pamphlets. She really cares a lot about politics and what's going on in the political world, but she can't really enter it because of her her social struggles and her position as a woman, as a single woman. So she started writing these political pamphlets. And so Earl Crush picks up 3 years later. She's been writing these political pamphlets for a couple of years. And in that time, she has started corresponding with this Scottish Earl. And they have kind of a friendly, whatever, they're friends. And he reveals that he is destitute. He's like on the verge of bankruptcy, whatever. So she's an heiress, and she's like, you know what? Like, it's not going great for me on the marriage mart. I'm not finding a lot of success. So she decides she's going to go up to Scotland and propose to this guy she's been corresponding with. She's like, I have money. You need money. I can live in Scotland. You're an earl. You can do politics. It'll be great. So she, again, I'm not spoiling anything. This is the first chapter. So she goes up. She's in Scotland in the first chapter. She knocks on his door. He opens the door. She proposes, and he's like, "Hi, lady. I have no idea who you are." And it turns out that his brother has been catfishing her for the last 3 years. So they wind up having to go hunt down the brother, and fall in love. There's a lot of yearning. If you like yearning and pining, he's pretty convinced that she's like into his brother, and he has a lot of daddy issues about his brother, and he just like longs and yearns for her for like 300 straight pages.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Yeah, so that is coming out January 25th, I think.
21st, yeah.
21st, yeah. So yeah, everybody get that. And Danielle asks, would you ever write a book for Peter's half-sister Lou? She's the best.
Oh, Lou. Okay, maybe I would have to figure out like the Victorian era, which is not a period that I've tried to write about before. So, but you know what? I'll tell you a funny story about Lou. So the story about Lou is that she just stole the show in every scene. Like I guess I just loved her, and it came out on the page. And so the first chapter is Peter and Lou and Freddie talking. And the original version of that scene was like 3 times as long. And the first time I sent this book to my critique partners, they were like, Alex, you gotta cut that, because I could not tell from this first chapter who the main character was. They were like, well, is it Peter or is it this sister and she's gonna grow up? And like, this is like a childhood prologue. She stole the show so much that I literally had to cut like 2/3 of that scene out to try to to try to pull her back, because she wanted to steal the
Well,
book.
you already have the beginnings of a book then.
I do. It's written somewhere in a folder. I think that part of too why she is such a just an important character for me in that book is because she really has a big arc. Like, and a lot of times you really only get an arc with the 2 main characters, but Luke has a really big arc, like learning to trust Peter. They've had a hard time, and they've had a lot of people who are important to them die, and they've been kind of passed around from guardian to guardian, and she has a really hard time trusting that Peter wants to be there and that he's going to stay. And so writing that arc of her kind of gradually coming to trust him because he just keeps showing up for her was really, I loved writing it.
Oh, that is real. And it's important for us to see that too, that somebody can keep their promises, basically.
Yeah.
Jennifer seconds the book for Lou, and Sam wants to in the newsletter. So you've got spaces. You've got suggestions. I want to go back to something that, again, we were talking about before we started, was the Bridgerton effect. We were talking about this a little bit. Have you felt that because Bridgerton is now like this massive TV show and everybody's buying Bridgerton books, that it's had an effect on historical romance in general and on your ability to be published yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I think it certainly sold a lot of Bridgerton books. I don't. Well, here's what I'll say. I think that I have heard from lots of people who have said, I watched Bridgerton and then I read the books and then I went out looking for more books like that. And I think that's fantastic. I love that it's been an entry point for people. And I think, the Bridgerton books were incredibly important to me. I started reading Julia Quinn before Bridgerton, like her early books. I can remember I had this used bookstore that I would go to, and she had gotten The Duke and I as I guess as an arc. And she was like, "Oh, Alex," she was like, "I know you like Julia Quinn." She was like, "This is special." She was like, "That you are gonna love this one." So I mean, I remember getting The Duke and I like the day it came out. I was so excited. So yeah, so I love that they are bringing people in. I don't know that I think it's had like a transformative effect on historical romance. I think we just things go in cycles and certain things are, hitting TikTok right now, but 5 years ago, TikTok didn't even exist. So who knows in another 5 years or 10 years. I love when people tell me that my books were like an early historical for them. Like, oh, I'd never read historical or I never thought I would like it. And then I read yours and I did. I think I really see my books as being intentionally like accessible historicals to invite people into the genre that has meant so much to me for 25 years. So that's special for me when I feel like I'm part of that, inviting people
Good answer. So I have to say that my favorite Julia book is actually Splendid, which is not a
in.
right?
So vividly. I have it somewhere. I don't know, on my
Oh,
shelf.
I totally have all of her books, but that one is my that was my gateway, and it's still my favorite. And I think that that's true that your books are very accessible because they're not. I don't know. They're well written. They're funny. They've got heart. And people are happy. Like
You know what? I am just like a happy person. Like I have a I it's hard for me to be down. Even when rough things happen, I just can't seem to stay down. So I'm glad that comes out in the book.
shocking. Okay. So somebody asks, "Hi Alex, what are some recent romance books that you've read and would recommend?"
Okay. I love this question. So I've got a little stack here. So for the first thing I want to talk about is the Windflower. Okay. So this is the Windflower. And I just read this for the first time. So this book came out in 1984. And people have been telling me to read it for a long time, and I had not until last week. It is amazing. Have you ever read this, Mina?
I don't think so. Who wrote it?
Laura London. Laura London is the author, which is a married couple, Sharon and Tom Curtis.
Mhm.
And they were writing in the 70s and 80s. This is actually one of their last books, and it is unreal. It's so bonkers. It's pirate. So he's a pirate and he kidnaps her on his pirate ship, and he's also a spy and he's also a duke, of course. And she like pulls a crossbow off the wall and tries to shoot him with a crossbow. I mean, it's just absolutely bananas. So one thing that I sometimes do on my Instagram is I'll read these really like bonkers 80s books and recap them. So like it's $1.99 the ebook if you want to buy the ebook. It's very cheap. Or you can just follow my recap because I recap all these completely bonkers plot events. It is wild. It is bananas. The writing is so florid and it is so fun. You can just tell from reading it that Sharon and Tom Curtis, the authors, were having a blast. And so just talking about characters liking each other, Devin and Mary are the two main characters, and they really like each other. Like they're supposed to be enemies, like because he kidnapped her, and they can't stop having fun together. They just have so much fun. There's an extremely dramatic grand gesture that he does to save her life. It's just fabulous. It's fabulous. So I just read.
I'm a huge fan of the 80s books. I know they haven't all aged that well, but I am a fan. So I will pick that up.
Yeah, definitely pick it up. And I also did a talk about it with my friend Candy Tan, who was one of the founders of Smart Bitches Trashy Books. I love
Mhm.
Candy. So smart about romance. So I did a talk with her, which is recorded on my Instagram. So if anyone reads it and wants to like hear us babble, please come watch that. So that. Then I want to recommend this,
Oh,
which yeah, I really love this series. So this is Isabel and the Rogue, which is the second Luna Sisters book by Liana de la Rosa. And if you're not familiar with these books, it is about three sisters who are Mexican heiresses. They come over to England during the French occupation of Mexico, and they want to kind of help eject the French. There's some light spying. This one, Isabel, is kind of like spy on spy. And there's just a really different historical perspective. It's bringing a lot of historical information that I did not know and was not familiar with. And they're just great romances too. And I'm going to brag a little bit that I have the third one on my Kindle right now. It's coming out next year. I'm really excited to read it. Just bragging here about that. So I love that series. And then, okay, one more. One of my favorite books of the year was this, A Sure Thing by Joanna Lowell. I loved this book so much. It is so, so good. So this is okay, so we've got Kit, who is a painter, and Muriel, who is a botanist, and she wants to hire Kit to paint the illustrations for her botany book. And he agrees if she will go on a cycling tour race thing of Cornwall with him, which makes sense for plot reasons that she has to do this. And it's so lovely and sweet. And so Kit is a trans man. And Joanna Lowell writes this so well. I mean, just it's so historically grounded. It's so thoughtful. I mean, it really delves into the complexity of the experience and it doesn't simplify it, but also this book is so sweet. Like it is cozy and sweet and incredibly kind. And there's lovely, lovely found families in it. So yeah, one of my favorite books of the year.
Okay, well, I see some of our attendees, Danielle and Megan Meg are going to be sharing this book.
Perfect. I really like the paperback because it has this really beautiful like hot pink spine. Yeah. So anyway, I love this one.
All right, everybody, do
Those
not
are
get
my
it on your
most
Kindle. Just get the actual book because it sounds like it'll look beautiful on your shelf too.
definitely.
So, we know that Earl Crush is coming out in January. When is our third book coming out?
I'm not supposed to say this, but I'm gonna tell you anyway, so don't get me in trouble. It's coming out September 23rd. Um, and I have seen the cover and it is fabulous. It's like it's pink, but it's kind of like a gothic-y pink with
Yeah.
like little spooky touches. I would say the spookiness level is like a 2 out of 10. Like there's a little bit of gothic, like spookiness, but you won't be scared, I promise.
I do have to say on your website, you have little content warnings or labels for all of your books. And I just think that's so sweet. So like we can know what to look out for. I cannot wait to see the cover. So oh my gosh, I can't wait for all of your books, but definitely read, it has to be read. Does it have to be read in order, the three of them?
No, I don't think they have to be read in order. I mean, I think it's fun if you do read in order, but they definitely don't have to be read in order. In fact, I like my first editor left. So my second editor had never read Ne'er-do-Well when she started editing Earl Crush. So I can guarantee you that you don't have to read Ne'er-do-Well because she like came on and it was like 2 days later she had to like have this edit done, this poor woman.
Oh.
So anyway, she's lovely. So Earl Crush definitely stands alone. And the third book, they all stand alone. Although I think it's fun if you read them in order, but you don't have to.
I'm actually very obsessive about reading books in order. I have to actually put it down if I realize there's characters from another book in it because I'm obsessive, but not everybody is. So I
Not at all. It's total chaos. Like I do things wherever the wind strikes me.
I think I appreciate that because I hate that I have to read it in order because then I'm like I can't read the book in hand.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, anyways, thank you so much. This has been a fabulous hour of super fun. And I know that we'll all be looking to read your books. And remember, you can buy them from Blue Cypress Books. And I'll send everybody information about that signed because, gold, platinum, all of that. But in the meantime, you can also get them from the libraries because we always carry the best books. Don't we?
Absolutely, yes. Huge supporter of libraries. I wrote a whole trilogy about set in a library.
Erotica.
Fun fact about the trilogy set in a library is that all three of the books have a spicy scene in the library. So you can look forward to that in all three of the books.
That's right. That'll just give another whole element of librarians to the world.
Right. But it's like in an office, so it's okay. It's not like in the stacks. Don't worry. Don't worry, librarians.
That would have been fine with me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you all so, so much for coming. This has just truly been a delight.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And for everybody who's been here, I hope you all have a wonderful night and happy reading. Good night, everybody.